Members of the committee, before Mr. McQuiston begins, I wanted to make sure that, I don't know if is the letter from Mr. Riebling on their desks? Oh, there was an email today from Mr. Riebling. I mean, he's actually here, and rather than reading his letter, Rich, do you want to just comment on the letter that you have sent out? Whoops.
Sure. I know I had received a lot of inquiries from members of the council asking if about the study that's being done, looking at the whole procedures of the Transportation Licensing Commission, and specifically some questions about additional staffing that may or may not be required in conjunction with the commission's, I guess it would be a tentative approval of some additional taxi cabs. And so seeing that we were running up against the budget deadline and not having the report finalized yet, I asked them if they could respond specifically to the issue, if whether they're ready, if they in their report, as to whether additional staffing would be required. And they wrote me back a letter which was attached to the letter I sent to the council, that in their report will suggest that that additional staffing is not required at this time should these additional taxi cab licenses be granted. But I thought to complete the budget process, that's something that people have been asking me, and I want to get that out before, and then the rest of the report should be ready in hopefully less than 2 weeks, hopefully sooner, but probably post your decision on the budget.
Thank you. Members of the committee, this is Mr. Brian McQuiston, the Director of the Transportation Licensing Commission. Our threshold question, Brian, is, are you satisfied with your budget? And if you would answer that, and then feel free to make any introductory remarks you wish to make.
Yes, we are. We can do what we're doing now with this budget. It did not cut us any, so it kept us about status quo in terms of our operating budget. So we will operate with that. As you may know, the Commission regulates wreckers, taxis, horse-drawn carriages, non-taxi passenger vehicles for hire, and booting services. That regulation includes licensing and permitting over 200 companies and 1,400 drivers, inspecting over 800 vehicles, and enforcement of 6 ordinances. We also coordinate the mandatory training of over 900 taxi drivers and oversee the city's emergency wrecker system, and we do that with a staff of 6 people. It's important that we have a healthy and effective transportation system that includes taxis, liveries, and shuttles, and that everybody stays within their own area. To that end, last year the Commission began licensing the non-taxi passenger vehicles for hire, and we licensed and permitted about 60 companies and 400 drivers. For the year overall, we processed a record 1,650 applications for permits and licenses, which is an increase of 42% over the previous year. And out of those, about 1 out of every 50 applicants was screened out as either being disqualified or ineligible based on background checks and other things that we have to look at. A big part of our vehicle inspection program is the annual inspection of taxi cabs. We do that after the beginning of the year, when old vehicles have to be replaced by the companies voluntarily because they're too old, and get it done before the CMA Music Festival begins, which kicks off the tourist season here. This year's inspections resulted in the mandatory replacement of 34 taxi cabs, and that's an important aspect because we have been looking at them as a whole once a year. We do spot inspections throughout the year, but if you don't catch them at the time they're out, you may not see them except at one time. So as we looked at our inspection results over the last several years, we saw that many of the things that we were finding deficient with the vehicles in the inspections in the spring were things like bumpers, dents in the vehicles, bald tires, things like that didn't just happen the week before they came in to be inspected or on their way to the inspection. So we believe that more inspections are necessary, and in the coming year and probably years forward, particularly with the conventions that are coming, inspections of vehicles will take a high priority. This year for CMA, as in the last 3 years, beginning with the first CMA after the flood, our taxi cab inspectors and staffs, managers, dispatchers, staffs of all the taxi cab companies supported that festival by operating taxi cab stands downtown and at LP Field. And last week, I think they loaded out, well, many thousands of attendees at LP Field in short order. Without their help, it would have been a real jam downtown. So my hat's off to particularly the taxi companies and the drivers who worked together to make that run smoothly. We are on track to finish this year's budget within budget for expenses, and we'll have about $310,000 revenues, which is 25% over projections. Next year, as I said, next year's budget keeps us at about the same level. I've not seen the details of this, of the transportation study, so it's premature to say now how the commission will respond to it or how it will impact on our priorities for next year. But as I said, we should be focusing on vehicle inspections regardless and improving the condition of taxi cabs. So that's my presentation. I'll answer any questions.
Thank you. Councilman Hunt.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Brian, for being here. Good to see you again. I got two items I want to put before you, and I know you just said you hadn't seen the letter, but the transportation consultants recommend that a series of organization and computerization and various other processes and improvement be implemented, and that when that happens, no additional staffing is needed at this time to handle the additional volunteer taxi services.
Yes, sir, that's right.
Okay. Now, on the other hand, I'm getting this information that the money you submitted was not granted as additional funding because of in the opinion of the mayor's office, the awarding of permits to volunteer taxi and the TLC budget are two separate issues. Although the additional funding would have put volunteer taxis on the road to business, they themselves agreeing with the mayor's office that the awarding of the permits to volunteer taxis is a separate issue and that this company should be weighed up on its own merit. Having that information, one says that maybe some reorganization and computerization indicates that no additional staff or inspectors are needed. And the mayor's office saying this is two separate issues. What's your opinion and in terms of issuing volunteer taxi, their permits as they was, I think, promised? And when would that happen and what's preventing you from doing so?
Okay. Well, that's a commission decision first place, so it needs to get a commission decision, not mine. But what the commission did approve were 76 permits to be split between volunteer taxi, which requested, I believe they dropped their number to about 61, and green cab, which requested 50. So there's a decision surely has to be made on who gets how many if there's 76 permits awarded to the combination of those two companies. The other 12 permits are being issued as additional permits to existing companies. So that would have to be decided by the commission based on the merits of the two companies that are still applying for new permits.
And what would they use to base their decision on?
They'll probably question the two applicants again about whether they can do what they said they were going to do. I frankly don't want to put words in my commissioners' mouths, but we would have some questions about a company. Let's say, for example, if it is volunteer taxi, it's got 61 owners. Ultimately, what happens when there's a problem? Who do we go to? And how, so those sorts of things would, I'm sure, be answered in that meeting. They weren't answered before, but they should be. But that's part of the process.
So they didn't get this information when they came before when they requested the permits, and they were granted the permits, but was told that they couldn't be issued until they had additional inspectors. That's what I was told. Is that correct?
The commission's decision said it was conditional upon two things: whether we could get additional resources in the budget, which we are not, and whether, and a look at our fee structure to see if that could be changed to allow for that to be done without impacting on the taxpayers.
So when is your next meeting?
The meeting where the commissioners will consider this will be the July meeting, July 26th.
Okay, is there some kind of way that you can present this body the results of that meeting as it relates to volunteer taxing?
Afterwards, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Holloman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. McQuiston, for being here. I want to follow up on what Councilman Hunt said, just to be sure I understood, because I've received the same question I think that Mr. Hunt has received. Are you saying that basically that these permits for the additional cab drivers that came to the commission, in order for them to serve the city, either this body would allocate additional funds to hire an inspector, or the cost of the permit would be raised by the commission to cover the cost of the inspector? Is that what you were saying?
No, I'm saying that the commission left it up to a decision on whether the budget would allocate additional inspectors. In my mind, we needed more inspectors. Apparently, the consultants think we do not.
Okay.
We'll have to see what computerization improvements they think that they can help us with. We're very paper intensive now. We don't have computerization in the office for anything like permitting. We are working on that.
Oh, your permits aren't by computer?
No, sir. We're working on trying to get the record keeping of the computer of the.
So you have a paper file on every permit?
Yes, 16 file cabinets.
Wow.
ITS has been working on this for a number of years. I think it's coming to fruition shortly in terms of being able to.
Do you have a Rolodex too?
I think my office support specialist certainly does. Okay. I have just a list in my drawer.
Okay. We can go ahead though. I want to understand that.
Okay. So what the commission said though was that on my recommendation we needed more staff, another inspector, to be able to manage more than the 585 taxis we have right now.
Just to do what you're doing now.
If we were going to add more
if we
taxis.
went to that number, okay.
Right, and so that was the condition that they put on the approval of the permits. But they also wanted us to look at. They didn't say it was conditional upon what the answer might be, but they did want us to look to see if maybe fees could be increased to offset the cost of whatever that might be.
Okay, so in other words, increasing the fees might get you part of the way there, but it wouldn't get you all the way there.
We looked at that, and ultimately it got us about a third of the way there. And with the finance department, we've looked at all of the fees, not just the taxi-related fees, all of the fees throughout the department, and at least currently, it looks like we're receiving more revenue than we're using to produce all of those permits and licenses.
Okay, let me come back to the idea that we still have paper files for all the permits. What would be the cost of automating that? Do you have an estimate to go to a computer database?
No, sir. The ITS is working on it though now, and I'm sure they'd give the exact cost estimate because they've been working on it for about 3 years, and they're coming close to having the document management system, so at least we could take the applications we have, file them electronically. We would still be issuing permits by hand the way we do now.
Okay. What's the estimated timeline on that? Because did you say that IT's taken 3 years to get you a response?
No, they've been working on it for off and on. It's not been a high priority for, our department's not been the high priority for ITS, but they're coming close now to having a system where we can have enter our information about drivers, companies, insurance, et cetera, vehicles into a database where we can retrieve it quickly.
Okay. Do you think that'll happen in this calendar year?
It depends on, I think it could happen within the next fiscal year. Let's put it that way.
And maybe this is a little bit unfair, but I'm going to ask it and you just tell me if it is. Do you have any estimation of whether if you were more automated that you could potentially, in your opinion as the staff, perform the work of permitting additional cabs without an additional staff person if you were more automated?
I think permitting is not the issue.
Regulating is the issue.
Inspecting and enforcing is the issue.
Okay, but I'm guessing somebody spends time with all the permitting issues, that they wouldn't have to, that would free them up to do inspection work if they didn't have to do that, or are they separate staffers?
I have two office staff people who do all the permitting and licensing and everything else to handle cash receipts and supplies, that sort of thing. We had one, we got a second one when when the council passed the ordinance to regulate the non-taxis. We got an additional staff person inside to do that, and an additional inspector.
Okay.
And so our in-house, those two people could continue doing what they are and probably add a few more permits. That would not be an issue for them. It's inspection of the vehicles and enforcement on the street.
Okay, and I'm sorry, just while we're talking about this, I haven't looked at your FTE. So you have two assistants that are administrative in-house, and then I assume the remainder of your staff are inspectors that are actually out in the field. Is that correct?
We have 6 people, myself, 2 office staff, and 3 inspectors.
Okay, okay. And of the 3 that aren't inspectors, they don't do any inspection work, cross-trained or anything like that?
No.
Okay, okay.
I'm cross-trained to do permitting. So I help with the office work, and the inspectors do all of they've got patrol cars out on patrol. That's their job.
Understand. Okay. Thank you, Mr. McQuiston.
All right.
Councilman Tigert.
Thank you. So if I'm reading your numbers correctly, Brian, our budget book shows that your revenue for next year is projected at 267.3, but you reported this year's revenue is in the 310 range.
Right. Okay, I can
go ahead.
Okay. As you know, we start the budget process in December, or around the beginning of January, and as a result, we've got a large percentage of our revenues we don't have yet, so we're going by where we were last year. So we look at last year's budget, and we assume that it's going to be about the same. We still don't have in all the wrecker renewals and licensing fees. At that time, we don't have any of the carriages, and we don't have any of the non-taxi passenger vehicles for hire. So it's usually an effort to try to stay not overly optimistic, but not ridiculously pessimistic. This year we did very well in terms of revenues. Part of that was because with this economy, we've had a lot of people applying to become taxi drivers. And part of that application in the first year is to go through a background check at $75, and the permit's $20. So we had a lot more applicants for taxi permits this year than we've ever had before. Whether that will continue on or not, I don't know. The other thing about that is they only pay for that background check once every 5 years. So it won't turn around and be the same next year. If they stay in business, they won't need that background check again.
So what realistically would you project as revenue for next year?
I think what I put in the budget might still be small. It kind of depends on how. I think probably if we get these additional licenses and permits, it will be much higher than that. So we may be in the neighborhood of 290 again.
Okay. And Rich, I assume that additional revenue will be reflected in the numbers that you all project in the budget, this additional revenue?
You asking if we're going to change the number?
Yes.
This is the first I've heard of it, so I'd have to look into it and see if there's any substance to it.
Can I change the number then?
No, you cannot.
What?
Would you like me to cite the Metro Charter provision?
No, I'm just curious that if Mr. McQuiston's expecting 290, but earlier on in the year, the budget book says 267, how that adjustment gets made, or is it just found money?
It doesn't get adjusted in the budget book, but it would get adjusted in that we'd have more revenue and it'd go to fund balance. So
Gotcha. Okay.
I could explain that number. We had projected based on the current licensing fees. By these 88 more permits, we projected $22,400 more revenue. That was not included in our budget, however, so that would be where that additional money would come from.
Okay, and I don't know if you have these numbers directly in front of you, but on G30, your internal service fees a couple years ago were in the 80,000 range, and this year are in the 52 range, which is contrary to what we have been seeing from most departments. What is the reason that your fees are going down?
I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. We've not changed anything in the way we do things. What may have changed is some of the costs in terms of building space, because at one point we're up in Metro Southeast. We have an inspection bay. At one point we were being allocated much
more
more of that
feet.
space than we have now. I mean,
And that-
we actually never had the space, but it was allocated to us.
Gotcha. That may be, I was just curious because it was unusual to see. Thank you. I'm not going to, because of some of the other issues, I think we'll be addressing them as the report comes out and the issues about limos and all that. So that's not a budgetary issue now. So we'll save those questioning in that line for another day. Thank you.
Councilman Tiger, thank you for being so responsible. Councilman Garrett.
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to remind the councilors that when we're talking about fees, that this council can raise the fees if with the, I'm sure your board has come before us as they did in 2010, I believe, for recommendations. So the board doesn't set those fees, this council does. And so if they need more money when the time comes, then some individuals in the council need to consider raising the fees if they need more inspectors.
Councilman Davis, did you want to?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, I apologize.
Cut off. It's been a long time, hadn't it, Ronnie? Thank you. Mr. McQuiston, thanks for being here. Just real quick, I didn't want to belabor that point, but just help me understand, why, I guess you did 1,700 licenses last year. Does it not kind of reset at the end of the year and you have many more licenses and capacity? Is it the inspecting then that is the problem, that, you can't add 60 more cabs to your fleet?
As far as needing additional resources?
Yeah, because, the mayor's office.
It's about inspection and on the street enforcement. We have many industries we regulate. We really have one taxi inspector, and he gets help from the others when they're not doing wreckers or liveries or booting or something else. When I came here 8 years ago, we had 419 taxi cabs. When he came here, he had 250. Now we have 585. It's really questionable as to how much more one person can do. Mm-hmm. And we believed when we made the recommendation to the commission that we had pretty much topped off on what that inspector could do. Now, if we do less of something else, we can focus more on taxi cabs. That's really kind of the choices we all have to make.
So the licensing and permitting, even though we do a ton of those, that's not exactly related to what these guys.
Yes, sir.
I think it's just, we've all been getting all this correspondence and, I think we're all maybe a little tired of it, just wondering if we can get these guys their permits and just have them go about their business. So we're looking to figure out a solution and how we can make that happen. So.
Well, one thing I would like to point out is this recommendation was made initially for more permits. Although their applications came in, a large part of the commission's decision-making, I believe, was the result of the Convention and Visitor Bureau coming before the commission in November to promote the idea of we need more taxi cabs when the convention center opens up.
Okay.
So the reason it had to be dealt with really when it was is because the convention center will open up in fiscal year 2013. And making a decision in December or November of this year, which is their annual meeting, would probably be too late to impact on the opening. Now, whether the company needs its permits tomorrow or next month versus when the convention center opens up is something I think that the commission needs to, and the company needs to be concerned about. Is they'd like to get their permits immediately. But the impetus for this was the opening of the convention center.
Sure. Okay, well, we want to make sure you have capacity. I second the, definitely automating. I think we'd like to see how you could do more automation, and, we'll be interested in possibly funding that for next year. Yeah, any way we can push this along, I think we all just want to see results and kind of get past this. So we'll look forward to your report. Thank you.
Councilman Pardue.
Brian, it seems to me the way y'all running that office over there, you could get some help from the Historic Commission. Now, I don't know if you can or not. But one question I've got.
I guess I missed their comments.
It's been a few years now, but when I was policing, we used to use your people a lot on the midnight shift, where we at one time had a taxi cab company selling more dope than the Mexican cartel. And if we stopped one of these guys, they'd come out and do the inspection for us. Now, are you still doing that?
Right, we do. We work with the police, particularly with auto theft. On mostly, that's primarily with wrecker-related issues, a lot of auto theft, wrecker issues that we deal with. So yes, we do.
Now, do you have anybody, any of your office personnel that works the midnight shift where they can call them and?
Well, all of our inspectors generally work their hours work around when their target vehicles are out. So for the most part, that's evenings. We don't want to just be predictable, however, so they will work some days so that they catch people who are running illegally during the day as well. But they'll work generally till about 11 or so on the weekends, somewhat later. But if there's something that we think is really important to watch for late, their shifts are flexible. They start late, they finish late.
I've got just two more. Who do you pay the $75 each for a background check?
Okay. State law mandates that all municipalities that of our size that require background checks as part of the licensing or permitting of taxi drivers and other passenger vehicle for hire drivers, that if we're going to do that, that we have to use the FBI fingerprint background check and the Tennessee applicant processing system. So we pay the TBI's vendor for the fingerprinting. We collect the $75. We keep a portion of that as an administrative fee, which the law allows us to do. The remainder of that we pay to the TBI's vendor for the actual fingerprinting. The fingerprint background checks themselves are done by the FBI and TBI. They send us a report. I review those.
Okay. And one more. I had a complaint the other day that a fella, he tried to rent one of the horse-drawn carriages to take him back to his hotel. And I understand they're not allowed to go to a hotel. What's the reason for that?
The ordinance. Chapter 12.54 on routes says that all routes and stands for carriage operations in Nashville have to be approved by the Traffic and Parking Commission in consultation with us. So they've approved one route. They can, if a company has a route, an event, a wedding somewhere downtown that they want to operate, they can request an exception for that time and that period. The Traffic and Parking Commission makes that decision based on traffic.
So they can't be used like a taxi cab. They have to stay on that route.
Right.
All right. Thank you, Brian.
Councilman Dominy.
Thank you, Chairman. Brian, good to see you. We've had some communication over the last week or so. I got a few questions. First of which is, when was the last time fees were increased for any of the services that you oversee?
Well, the booting fees and some of the non-taxi passenger vehicle for hire fees were established when those ordinances passed. So the latest one was I think the renewal fee for the certificates for livery services, that sort of thing. But as far as taxi fees are concerned, those go back to probably 2000, before I came there.
Okay. Could you provide that to me in writing?
When they were done and so on?
When they were done, the various fees that you charge and the divisions that you handle, and provide that to me in writing so I have that. Also, I'd like to know how many permits, in particular in the taxi cab arena, are currently approved and operational,
500,
and to what companies?
585 total. United has 70. United Cab has 70 of those. American Music City has 95. Yellow Cab has 125. Checker Cab has 85. The remainder are all in Taxi USA of Tennessee, which owns Allied Cab, Nashville Cab, and 1-800 Taxi Cab.
Okay. I'm assuming you can provide that in writing.
Sure.
Follow up too, please. Have there been any studies done besides, you had mentioned the Convention Visitors Bureau came to you suggesting they need additional taxi cabs because of the opening of the convention center. Have there been any studies done to indicate what the actual needs might be for additional cabs?
This has come up before. That's one reason why this transportation study was being looked at, because we don't have a formula. What we generally look at are three things. We look at, every year when we determine we need more permits, we look at airport departures and are those going up? Are they staying the same? are they running out of cabs at the airport? We look at the hotel occupancies, and are those going up? In other words, all that to measure visitor needs. We look at the population growth in general, and companies will come and say, look, the population's increased by this much, therefore we'd like to have more permits because, you know, we think that population deserves more. And we have a public hearing, and at that public hearing every year we will hear from drivers who will talk about, and companies, but generally from drivers who talk about the impact of the economy and how much business there is that they're able to, you know, to get. Is it enough for them to make it a living wage? For many years, one of the biggest complaints that we heard was the number of non-taxis that were doing taxi type of business. And so even had we had a study, without knowing that number, we would not really have a handle on what the real need is, because there's a whole shadow taxi industry out there. With the passage of that ordinance a couple of years ago, though, we should now be able to get those folks under control, and we're still trying to do that. But that's probably the biggest piece of it.
Excuse me, Mr. Riebling, did you want to respond to that?
Just quickly, add to what Mr. McQuiston said. Obviously, that's one of the reasons why we decided it was important to get a study done, because there had been a lot of numbers and data, but there hadn't been anybody who really looked at it comprehensively in terms of what's the right number and what do we need to do, especially in light of the new convention center opening next year. So it's my understanding that that's going to be addressed in the report, along with probably some analysis of the various fees and things of that nature. So I think for the first time we'll have somewhat of a comprehensive guide. Obviously we can choose to what we choose to do with it will be up to the commission and the council and everyone else, but at least we'll have some data to go by, what some other jurisdictions are doing and things of that nature, which should provide us hopefully some good information to make some decisions to make sure this is operated in the most efficient way possible.
Excuse me, Councilman, you anticipate that being finished when?
It's my understanding that it's sometime in the next 2 weeks it should be ready.
Councilman Dominy.
All right, thank you. I've got a couple others. I appreciate that input, Rich. Based on the letter that was provided to us today, that report suggesting that they do not need an additional inspector, is there a chance the commission will remove their contingency of approving the volunteer taxis permits based on the funding of that additional inspector? Or would that have to be determined in the future? I mean, what are we going to do based on that report?
Well, as I was saying in my response to Councilman Hunt, I think that needs to be done at the July commission meeting. I mean, frankly, I don't see any roadblocks to them making a decision on issuing those permits, but the decision will still have to be made on who they get issued to and you know, when they will become effective, exchange of information like that. But that is a commission decision will have to be made in the July timeframe. But I think the budget issue would appear, at least to me, to be put to bed.
If we do not increase the fees, how will that impact your budget, if any, to add those additional?
$22,400 of revenue.
Okay, and if we were to increase the fees as the letter that you and I have communicated about over the last week, how would that impact?
Well, I don't know that would be necessary. That would just be additional revenue if that's added in.
All right. And one other question, and you may not be prepared to answer this one. I know there's some question going on about the inappropriate use of police badges. Is that investigation going to impact your budget in any way?
I wouldn't think so.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Allen.
Quick follow-up to the number of inspectors question. In both your goals and your strategic issues, you also mentioned raising vehicle standards in preparation for the opening of the Music City Center. Will that require more time from inspectors? Does that feed into the need for more, perhaps?
No, this is, well, it will and it won't. Part of it is regulatory changes. We're having a public hearing at the June 28th meeting on proposed changes to the ordinance. Of course, so we'll come back before you again sometime later, but those recommendations are to decrease the mandatory retirement age of taxi cabs so that we have newer vehicles, replace them more frequently than we do now. And also that vehicles, when they are damaged, even in a minor accident even, that they be removed from the street until they've been inspected and have been fixed, so that we don't have them waiting 12 months with those sorts of things. So those, if people do what they're supposed to do, will take care of, some of our inspection concerns. But we probably need to do more inspections in addition to that, and that will impact on our inspectors' time.
Councilman Claiborne.
Thank you. I don't have a question for Mr. McQuiston, but based on the questions of a couple of people that have asked about the decision that the commission made, I'd like to just give a perspective, because I was at that meeting. I went down to speak. I have several of these individuals who live in my district, and they had I went down to address the commission, and once we got started, actually it started about 25 minutes after it was supposed to. A room full of people standing there waiting for the chairlady of the commission to arrive, who came in late, took about 5 minutes to get herself situated, never apologized for being late. And she started and announced that there would be no public hearing, that no one would be able to address the commission. And the public hearing had been held in the previous meeting. So I waited to hear the discussion, and as the commission moved along, they began to talk about the permits, and that there were different entities, two different entities especially, that were asking, and they were moving toward cutting that number down, kind of giving a number and dividing it, as Mr. McQuiston has talked about. And one of the inspectors asked to address the commission at that point, and was given the permission to do so, and he made a quite lengthy, passionate appeal that this was going to place an additional work burden on the inspections, and that he didn't think it was a good thing to do. And the discussion for the commission, as I perceived it, turned at that point, and they said, we will approve these based on the council's recommendation for money to fund another inspector. And so that's the way the decision was arrived at, as I witnessed it as a member of that group that was there.
Councilwoman Blaylock.
Thank you, Chair. This is in regards to the inspectors. You've got 3 inspectors. I guess they work 40 hours a week, right? And they just inspect, is that right?
No, they enforce and inspect.
Okay. And about how many inspections do they do a week?
Well, it depends on which inspector it is. The taxi inspector does more than the others because we have standards for taxi inspections. He does his annual taxi inspection, and he does spot checks as he does his patrols. The non-taxi passenger vehicle for hire inspector, who has been with us about 5.5 months, has been doing most of his inspections as part of the renewal or new licensure of companies throughout the spring. So his inspections have been basically on-site inspections for companies that are renewing or have come in for the first time to be inspected. We do not currently do wrecker inspections. Our inspectors have been trained to do that. They are going to Highway Patrol wrecker inspector training this August, so that they will be able to start doing wrecker inspections this fall. But in general, they help he's the swing man who helps the others inspect if they're not there, or to lengthen the inspection hours for the good of the people who need to bring vehicles in. Mm-hmm. We try to do our inspections at a time when, when we're available, not taking people out of their business to get inspected. So it may mean inspecting early in the day, and so one of the inspectors might be there early to inspect while the other one's going to work late doing his patrols.
So like the taxi inspector, does he do maybe 2, 3, 4 a day, or?
He did 600 taxi inspections with checklist. Correction. He passed 600 vehicles over a period of time from January till the CMA awards. Some of those later got replaced, so it came to the 585 permits. But the other inspections he does, the rest of the year, are not bring the person in and inspect him. It's he's driving by, sees somebody without a hubcap or light out or a dent or a dirty vehicle or a windshield cracked or something else, and he'll pull them over, say, you need to get that fixed. You got 24 hours or 48 hours, whatever it is, to get the job done. And he reports to the company that the company will follow up on that vehicle. So the number of that, I estimated those when we were looking at the permit fees with the finance department. I estimated that was about 1,000 spot inspections in a year.
Okay. So maybe the study will allude to this, but what is your take on the potential of the police force doing these inspections as opposed to having 3 additional individuals?
I think our people could do the inspections quite well. I think the police department is authorized and encouraged by the ordinances to enforce them. Enforcement would be an area where the police department could really help us. We've provided some training in the past at the academy, and they have got some typical violations by wreckers, typical violations by taxi cabs, by liveries, et cetera. So to give officers something to look for, easy one if they don't have a permit, stop them and take a look. But all of our ordinance violation citations go to environmental court, and we see very, very, very few citations on our ordinances by anyone other than our own 3 inspectors currently.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Bedney.
I'm trying not to be too angry. I'm very frustrated with this whole situation. We were told that you couldn't issue those permits because you needed extra people. Now we find out that the extra people were really not necessary. So how can it be that you don't know that you don't need extra people to run your office? How can it be that you have paper records in 2012? I just really want to see, for you to not give me any more excuses, and you tell me what will it take for you tomorrow issue the licenses that these people need?
It'll take a commission decision, sir.
Okay, so how do you get that commission to meet tomorrow? These people have been waiting for months. They're losing money. And because, the city accuses us of being bureaucratic, right? Cutting waste and all that here every day. And here we are waiting on people to get a permit, and it's not happening. So I don't want to hear any more reasons, because it looks like I'm talking to my son and asking him to pick up the room. I don't want to hear that anymore. I just want to hear, how do we make this happen immediately?
I don't have an answer for you.
Well, I need you to give me an answer as soon as possible. Thank you.
Councilwoman Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Stein and Director McQuistion, for being here today. I want to ask first, is your board chair or any of your board members here?
No.
Okay, because as a new council member, generally, I'm accustomed to seeing the director here with the board members. And the reason why I bring that up is because your board chair was supposed to have come to the Minority Caucus meeting, and she did not come then, and I just don't understand if this is important to them as it is to us. So I'm very disappointed in that none of them are here, especially the chair, given that she did not show up at the Minority Caucus meeting. The question that I have is, the Licensing Commission, your board, your commission, had already awarded 88 permits to volunteer taxi at the December 2011 meeting. So since I have this paper here, this letter, and Mr. Riebling has just shared what the letter states, which is that an additional inspector is not needed, I'm going to ask this question a different way than Councilman Hunt and Councilman Dominy asked it, and that is, can you, as a director, request that your board chair, Ms. Helen Rogers, remove the budget condition placed upon volunteer taxi so that they can start their business, since this consultant from the mayor's office that was hired has shared this new information?
I must point out that there is another company, Green Cab, that requested 50 permits. They will get a portion of whatever is approved. I think that's a commission decision and not the chair's decision to make.
But this was a decision at that meeting, and I'm asking, can you ask the board chair to remove the budget condition?
I can make that request.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to get the information again about how many permits with the taxis, the liveries, and all the other things that you're responsible for, your office. How many are you responsible for a year that's not included in here?
I'm sorry, how many permits?
Just all of the different things all the different functions that your office serves.
Okay.
How much monitoring are you responsible for a year?
You talk about monitoring as in on the street, looking.
Yeah, deliveries and everything, because it's only one portion in here.
Right, we're responsible for monitoring all of the.
So what's the numerical number with that? I want the numerical number. What is that?
About over 200 companies, over 1,400 drivers, over 800 vehicles.
Okay, so 200 companies.
Mr. McQuiston, if you would you provide that in writing?
Yeah, that would be great.
To Chairman McGuire, and he'll provide that to Councilwoman Gilmore.
Thank you.
If that's okay.
You're so wise. Thank you. That's what I wanted. Thank you.
Councilman Pridemore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, it's not a question, it's a statement. I'm a little concerned about the IT deal with taking 3 years to determine or to evaluate or to come to a conclusion as to whether you need to have or can have computerization in your office. I mean, I would like to put on our wish list that it's a non-monetary item, just that we encourage IT
Let me just say this. Why don't we ask, and Elise, if you will write that down, we'll get Chairman McGuire, whenever he comes back in, to send a letter to IT and get a response back from Mr. Durbin as to the status of all that. My suspicion is that Mr. McQuiston doesn't know specifically why it's taking that long. Let's get that answer in writing from Mr. Durbin.
That's great.
In the next couple of days.
Because it wasn't really a question, it was more of a request that we encourage IT to get this resolved. Thank you.
We're starting back the second way through, so I ask those that are asking questions for a second time, since we're now a half hour behind, to please stick to the budget. Councilman Hunt, do you wish to be recognized again?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I promise I'll be extremely brief. I just want, because there's some confusion, your requirement that you have to turn a cab over, recondition a cab after 10 years?
There's a mandatory retirement age. So a vehicle that is 10 model years old can no longer be a cab.
Can no longer be a cab. Now, I'm just trying to get a clarification of this so we can try to get it both on the same page. Now, my understanding, the companies that they work for requires 5 years.
There's a 5-year requirement on a vehicle being introduced as a cab for the first time. So basically, you can't have a 6-year-old vehicle and say, I want to put it on as a taxi cab. It has to be 5 years. That's all in the ordinance.
5 years before you can put it on?
Yes.
Or 5 years or new?
Or newer.
Yeah. Okay, I was wondering that because I'm trying to make sure that there's no conflict in message that's going to the owners and the drivers, because I've heard some of that out there and maybe they don't understand what's going on.
Well, there are some companies that have established a policy internally for who they will accept as a vehicle that is lower than our current ordinance standard.
And who overrides who?
The law. With the law, well, they can get a license, but they may not be able to work for that company with that vehicle.
Okay, I'll just get with you a little bit later on because I don't want to prolong the chairman's time. I see him anxious. Okay, bye.
Councilman Garrett. I'm not up here long, so I can afford to be impatient.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm going to ask, the council has to raise your fees, but I want to remind the council, and I know the reason that most people are talking about the issue with the taxi cabs. This is a regulatory agency, and it's actually against the law for them to make more money than what it takes to regulate their job. They're not supposed, and unfortunately, I've just kind of found out that in the past, there was actually more funds brought in your division for a number of years than it actually took to run it, which is actually against the charter or against the law. They're not supposed to take in any more money than what it takes to operate this. Today, you don't do that, do you?
Well, actually, we have, and I'll tell you. Here's why.
Are you taking in as much money as it takes to operate? Really?
No, not more than the whole operation, but more than if you. When you look at fees, the way we charge for fees, you only look at what actually goes into the permit or the license, not the whole department. You know.
I guess I was asking. Let me ask, Rich, are we subsidizing this department with general tax dollars?
Yes. About $200,000.
Microphone, please.
$200,000 is what he's. Yes. See, that wasn't true a number of years ago. I mean, that wasn't true for a long, long time. So if the fees haven't caught up with you, it's time to get the fees either. And here again, just from personal experience in '93 when that was done, that needs to be done. Maybe we can get permission at the state level to do just for our county, but your fees need to go up to keep up with it. And I'll ask another question: has there been any consideration given to you and the other two members that are administrative staff being more than cross-trained for what you're doing in the office?
In other words, being inspectors,
or enforcers.
You need a vehicle to get out there, and we're chasing vehicles. We'd have to have vehicles.
So you only have 3 vehicles?
We have 3 vehicles.
Well, that would be part of the request.
I think ultimately, though, there's been enough bad news about inspectors and so on.
I'm not worried about that. I'm trying to get you funds, I
understand what you're saying. But generally, our daytime is a very busy time for the staff inside, and they're at the beck and call of the customers coming in. So if we get a line of, as we will in September, hundreds of drivers trying to get their permits renewed, even I'm standing at the window with them taking care of customers.
Well, let me ask you one other question then. Is it the CVC that came before the Convention Center?
Convention Visitor?
CVB. If they came before you and letting them know that we're going to be needing more taxi cabs there, and for the council members who may be involved with trying to find funds, that might be a group that might be willing, with the administration's help, and Rich and I have been kind of discussing this, if they believe there might ought to be more taxi cabs on the road, then maybe they might want to pitch in some portion of the funds that go through the hotel motel tax to fund them to pay for maybe another inspector. But you're just looking for, there's also there's a tax levy downtown that might be able to pitch in some funds along that line. So you need to come up with some innovative type of ways where if people are asking you to do that, those particular agencies might be able to pitch in some funds to hire another inspector to go along with maybe some funds from the administration.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. We all know how helpful the state wants to be to us.
Yes.
Councilman Weiner, do you want to be recognized? Thank you, Mr. McQuiston, for your time.